In the spring of 1876, the United States was preparing to celebrate its centennial. Back east, the country was a rapidly industrializing powerhouse connected by iron rails. But that massive grid abruptly stopped at the Missouri River in Bismarck. The U.S. government was amassing a military force at this exact railhead. Their objective was a multi-column invasion of the Northern Plains to force the remaining independent Lakota Sioux and Northern Cheyenne onto reservations. To move men and supplies past the end of the tracks and into hostile territory, the military chartered the steamboat Far West. It was a 190-foot, shallow-draft riverboat hired to bridge the physical gap between the iron rails and the trackless frontier. Projecting an empire across the Great Plains demanded moving thousands of tons of industrial weight across a landscape that actively resisted it. General Alfred Terry and Lieutenant Colonel George Custer commanded a massive column that included the 7th Cavalry and a large infantry escort. Keeping that force moving meant fueling the biological engine of 1,600 horses and mules. This chart compares overland army wagons against the column's required daily fuel. Terry's animals consumed 12,000 pounds of grain every single day. Overland supply chains quickly collapse under this mathematical reality, leaving the winding river system as the only viable supply artery. The entire U.S. Army column was completely tethered to one wooden steamboat. If the Far West stopped moving, the invasion would starve. The Missouri River gave way to the Yellowstone, and the Yellowstone fed into the Bighorn. With every mile pushed westward, the waters became increasingly shallow, narrow, and treacherous. As water levels dropped, the boat's captain, Grant Marsh, had to force the vessel forward. He used thick wooden spars suspended near the bow to grasshopper the boat, literally lifting and pushing the hull over submerged sandbars and shallows. By late June, the Far West hit its absolute physical limit. The machine could push no further, mooring at the mouth of the Rosebud River. Here, Lieutenant Colonel George Custer made a fateful decision. He detached his 7th Cavalry from their floating supply base and disappeared into the rolling bluffs to hunt for the Sioux encampment. By severing their connection to that logistical tether, the 7th Cavalry voluntarily stepped off the edge of the industrial world. They isolated themselves entirely from any possibility of rescue. For days, a profound, agonizing silence settled over the river. Then, elements of General Terry's surviving column finally stumbled back to the moored steamboat. They delivered catastrophic news. Custer's entire immediate command had been wiped out at the Little Bighorn River by an overwhelming force of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors. The crew frantically converted the boat's decks into a field hospital. They loaded 52 severely wounded soldiers, including a Private Braun with a shattered femur, and a single wounded cavalry horse named Comanche. The machine designed to project unstoppable imperial power had been instantly humbled. It was now a blood-soaked ambulance holding the shattered remnants of American hubris. Captain Marsh broke the moorings, fired the boilers, and initiated a frantic full-steam retreat downriver to save the men bleeding out on his decks. Racing downstream meant navigating narrow, winding rivers choked with submerged cottonwood trees that could punch a hole through a wooden hull in seconds. And Marsh did it at maximum speed, driving blindly through the dead of night. A glowing point traces the Far West's escape route down the Bighorn, Yellowstone, and Missouri rivers to Fort Abraham Lincoln, 710 miles. They completed the journey in a record-breaking 54 hours, a sustained speed run never beaten in the steamboat era. The survivors' only hope lay in pushing their remaining industrial machine to the absolute brink of explosive structural failure. When the Far West slammed into the Bismarck docks, it violently reconnected the bleeding soldiers back to the civilization they had marched away from weeks earlier. While the dead and dying were carefully offloaded from the lower deck, a messenger sprinted into town to reach the telegraph office. Over the next several hours, a lone operator tapped out the details of a massacre. Those electrical pulses traveled thousands of miles to an East Coast currently celebrating the height of American invincibility at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. The defining legacy of the Little Bighorn campaign was a brutal military defeat, but it also exposed the terrifying reality of America's physical limits in the West. It was a reality that could only be escaped and reported by the very water that carried them there.